Imagine waking up to a headline that sounds like it belongs to another century. A superpower captures a foreign leader and then announces it will take the oil. That is exactly what President Donald Trump declared this week. Between 30 and 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil, high quality, sanctioned, transferred immediately to the United States government. Trump says the oil will be sold at market price. He says the money will be controlled by Washington. He says it will benefit both Venezuela and the United States. But history teaches us something uncomfortable. When oil, power, and military force collide, the story is never just about energy. I want you to pause here not to judge yet, but to think. Because this moment forces a question that goes far beyond Venezuela. Who controls resources when governments collapse? And what happens when control is justified as rescue? If you want to understand how we arrived at this point and why it may redefine global power, stay with me. Because the real story starts before the oil moves. To understand what is happening, we have to strip the drama down to its core. This is not just a military action. It is not just an oil deal. It is a redefinition of power, wrapped in the language of order and repair. The United States did not simply remove Nicolás Maduro. According to the announcement, it stepped into the vacuum that followed. Interim authorities, sanctioned oil, direct transfers, and most importantly, control over the proceeds. Trump's message is blunt. The oil will be sold. The money will be managed by Washington. And American oil companies may soon rebuild what he calls Venezuela's badly broken infrastructure. This creates a new equation. Force enables access. Access enables control. And control is framed as responsibility. The justification is efficiency. The promise is reconstruction. The leverage is oil. But beneath this structure lies a deeper question, one that history has asked many times and never lightly. And to answer it, we need to look backward before we look forward. To see how extraordinary this moment is, we need to remember what Venezuela once was. Not a failed state, not a broken economy, but an oil superpower. Venezuela holds over 300 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, nearly 4 times more than the United States. In the late 1990 seconds, it pumped 3.5 million barrels a day. Energy flowed, revenue followed, the system worked. Then the cycle turned. Mismanagement replaced expertise. Corruption hollowed out institutions. And as extraction costs rose, investment vanished. Production collapsed to around 800,000 barrels a day. Oil didn't disappear. The capacity did. Sanctions tightened the chokehold. Infrastructure decayed. The state lost its grip not just on oil, but on legitimacy. This is the vacuum Trump is stepping into. A country rich in resources, poor in capacity. A system broken enough that outside control can be framed as salvation. And that framing sets the stage for the first real rupture, the moment when force and economics fully converge. The rupture came suddenly, and it came with force. Strikes on the capital, a sitting leader captured, Nicolás Maduro and his wife taken to New York to face criminal drug charges. In one move, the political center of Venezuela collapsed, and almost immediately, the oil surfaced. Trump's message was unmistakable. This was not Iraq, he said. This time, the United States would keep the oil, not seize it quietly, not manage it in the shadows, but say it out loud. Between 30 and 50 million barrels transferred directly to U.S. unloading docks, stored on ships, sold at market price, with proceeds controlled by Washington. This was the first crisis point, not the capture itself, but what followed. Because once oil becomes the organizing principle of intervention, everything changes. War becomes accounting. Reconstruction becomes ownership. And sovereignty becomes conditional. If you're trying to make sense of this moment, don't look at the explosions. Look at the contracts that come next, because beneath this crisis lies a quieter system. one designed long before the first strike. What we are really witnessing is not chaos. It is a system revealing itself. Oil is not just a commodity here. It is the mechanism. When Trump says the oil will be sold at market price, that sounds neutral, almost technocratic. But control over pricing, timing, and proceeds is power in its purest form. Energy Secretary Chris Wright is tasked to execute the plan immediately. Major U.S. oil companies are invited in: Chevron, ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, billions in investment, broken infrastructure to be fixed, production to be restored. On the surface, this looks like reconstruction, but structurally, it is something else. Military force creates access. Access creates exclusive partnership. Exclusive partnership locks in long-term influence. The state does not disappear. It is re-engineered. Venezuela's oil flows again, but through American hands, American firms, and American decision-making. This is how modern power works. Not through permanent occupation, but through systems that make withdrawal irrelevant. And when such a system is in place, the second crisis is never far behind. The second crisis does not arrive with bombs. It arrives with numbers, barrels per day, billions in capital, timelines for restart. Trump promises speed. American companies will move in. They will spend billions. They will make the oil flow again. But here is the tension. Those companies have not confirmed they are returning. The infrastructure is described as badly broken. Years of decay cannot be reversed by declarations alone. This is the pressure point, because if production lags, legitimacy erodes. If profits rise without visible recovery, resentment grows. And if reconstruction benefits corporations faster than citizens, the narrative collapses. This is where systems fail, not loudly, but quietly. In spreadsheets, in delayed shipments, in promises that outrun reality. The second crisis is about credibility. Can power deliver what it claims? Can control translate into stability? And most importantly, who absorbs the cost if it doesn't? To answer that, we have to stop looking at leaders and corporations and start looking at people. This is where the story stops being abstract and starts being personal. If you are Venezuelan, this is not a debate about barrels or markets. It is about whether tomorrow feels safer than yesterday. You hear promises of billions. You hear talk of rebuilding, but what you live with is uncertainty. Will jobs return, or will outsiders take them first? Will electricity stabilize or stay fragile? Will oil money reach schools and hospitals, or disappear into systems you cannot see? And if you are watching from abroad, you should recognize this feeling. Because it is familiar, it is the moment when decisions made far above your head reshape your daily life. Trump says the oil will benefit the people. That is a powerful promise. But promises do not heat homes. Systems do. This is the human test of power. Not whether oil flows, but whether dignity does. If this story matters to you, don't just watch it pass. Think about who decides, who benefits, and who waits. Because what happens next in Venezuela will echo far beyond its borders. And that brings us to the world watching closely. The world is not just watching, it is calculating, because what happens in Venezuela does not stay in Venezuela. When a superpower openly takes control of another country's oil, it sends a signal, quiet but unmistakable. Resources can be reallocated. Sovereignty can be conditional, and power can be justified as management. Energy markets respond first. 30 to 50 million barrels moving toward US. Docks, changes, flows, pricing expectations, leverage. Allies take note, so do rivals. For oil-producing states, this raises a chilling question. What protects you when your institutions weaken but your resources remain valuable? For emerging economies, the lesson is sharper. Control is no longer just about territory. It is about systems, logistics, finance, infrastructure, enforcement. Geopolitically, this blurs lines between intervention and administration, between partnership and dominance, between rebuilding and owning. And once those lines blur, they rarely snap back into place. The Venezuelan case becomes a precedent, not necessarily one others will copy, but one they will prepare for. Because the future of global order is not being written in treaties alone. It is being written in energy flows. And the next chapter is about where this path leads. Now we arrive at the future. And there is not one version of it, there are three. The first is the optimistic path. Oil infrastructure is rebuilt faster than expected. Production rise. Revenue is managed transparently. Stability returns not because of force, but because systems begin to work. In this scenario, control gradually gives way to partnership, and Venezuela regains capacity without losing its future. The second path is more likely. Oil flows again, but unevenly. Profits arrive before reform. American companies succeed. The state functions but narrowly. Enough stability to prevent collapse. Not enough trust to inspire renewal. Power holds, but legitimacy remains fragile. Then there is the third path, the dangerous one. Reconstruction stalls. Resentment grows. Oil becomes a symbol of extraction, not recovery. And control requires constant reinforcement, economic, political, even military. History tells us something sobering. Systems built on resources alone rarely endure. They must be rooted in consent. The future of Venezuela will not be decided by oil prices alone. It will be decided by whether power can transform into governance. And that brings us to the final question, what this moment really means. This moment will be remembered for one reason. Not because oil changed hands, but because the rules did. When a president can say plainly, we're going to keep the oil, the world has crossed a psychological line. Power no longer hides behind abstraction. It speaks directly. I am not here to tell you what to think. I am here to tell you what to watch. Watch how control is justified. Watch how reconstruction is measured. Watch whether people feel ownership or only oversight. Because the real question is not about Venezuela. It is about the future of global order. Will power be exercised as stewardship or as entitlement? That answer will not come from speeches. It will come from outcomes. And you, as a citizen of this world, have a role to question narratives, to demand clarity, and to understand how economics quietly shapes destiny. If this analysis helped you see the system behind the headlines, share it. Continue the conversation and stay with me because the next story is already forming.